morning. Welcome to the Dissident Daughters podcast. I am your host, Ada, and I'm excited to be back. I've been gone for a while. Actually, it feels like it's been a really long time. So, just to give you a brief little recap, I went to Hawaii for 10 days and had so much fun. Hawaii, if you've never been to Hawaii, we went to Maui this time. We've been to Maui before, and we've been to Kauai. Those are the only two islands I've been to. But it's beautiful. It's magical. It's healing. It's like this place that just makes your soul feel like it's alive. I can't describe it any other way. But yeah, we spent a lot of time in the water, in the ocean, on the beach, in the sand, just kind of soaking up the beauty of the earth. And like, I really felt this deep connection with the earth and the ocean. It's so, I don't know. It's so hard to describe, but it's just glorious. We did so many fun things. We kayaked and we snorkeled with sea turtles, and we parasailed, and we hiked, and we stopped by farmers markets and got yummy fresh fruit, and we swam in the ocean, and we just laid out in the sunshine. We walked in the rain. We ate really good food. Oh my gosh, we slept so good. I don't know. It's just this magical, magical place. I slept so good while we were in Hawaii. And I literally never wanted to come home. It was so hard to come home. I thought after 10 days, I'm going to be ready to come home. Guess what? I wasn't ready to come home. I told my husband, let's just send for our baby girl, and she can come out here and we can just stay for however much longer we need to. It was just wonderful and magical, and a really good time for me and my husband to just reconnect, for it to be just us two together. And I love spending time with him. It's, I guess in some ways I feel like it's such a miracle that I actually love being with my husband, because I did not grow up in that environment. My parents did not enjoy being together. They did not love that, and they didn't bond and connect with each other ever. I never witnessed that. And so I do realize how lucky I am, and that I have that. And so happy 25th anniversary to us. It was just a really good time. Really, really fun. So what's been going on in the Mormon world? Ooh, one of the things that I watched this last week was that show on Netflix, Sins of the Mother. Oh my goodness. If you haven't seen that yet, it is crazy. And it's the Lori Vallow Daybell story and Chad Daybell story. I had paid really close attention to that story as it was unfolding, and I've listened to podcasts about it, and I thought I knew all the details, but there was actually quite a few new things that I learned from watching that docuseries. So it was really good. We binge watched it all in one night. And I mean, there's just some crazy shit. And if nothing else, like, there has to be, after all the shows that have come out in the last 6 months, and there's more coming, like, members of the church have to be genuinely like, what is happening? And you know that saying, like, where there's smoke, there's fire? I wonder how many members are going, man, there's a lot of smoke. There's a lot of smoke coming from this church and from members of this church. And I think they have to be starting to recognize that it's not just isolated incidents, that it's not just one person here or there randomly, that it's like story after story after story. And we could just keep going forever and ever and ever, and probably never run out of stories. I was listening to the most recent Mormon Stories podcast with John Larson from Mormon Expressions and Kara Burrell. It was so good, by the way, if you haven't listened to it. Those are the only Mormon Stories episodes that I typically listen to anymore, but It was about, I think the title of it is Why Are Ex-Mormons So Angry? I think that's what it is. It's so good. I mean, they touched on so many things that relate so deeply to my experience, and the betrayal, the absolute betrayal we feel, and the shunning, but the way they describe it, how it's so different than like Scientology or Jehovah's Witnesses, where it's like real, like severe physical shunning. This is like such a subtle, like they do it in such a subtle and passive way. It brought up a lot of emotions for me, because John Larson was explaining how like him and his parents have a loving relationship, but they don't ever ask him about his life, and they don't know what's going on with him personally, and they never ask, and they don't care to know, and these kinds of things. And it's because they are, afraid to know what he's up to. They know that he, has done these ex-Mormon podcasts and whatever. So it's this very passive, weird way of shunning, but it still feels so hurtful and sad. And yeah, just listening to him talk about that, it really struck a chord with me. I was really emotional about that, because I've talked about my one sister in particular who I was very, very close with, and who I shared too much information with, and it destroyed our relationship. And she really doubled down. And the kind of the strange part about this is that's not typically who she is. She's always been a very like carefree, not like toe the line type of Mormon. I would even say that she was super nuanced, and she's lived a pretty free and wild life, I would even say, like compared to me. She's done all the things. She tried all the drugs. She had sex with lots of people. Like she lived her life and didn't maybe just didn't live super strictly. She's not orthodox, I guess. She's never lived like a super strict Mormon life, right? She's like the really fun and loud and crazy one, and we were super, super close for so long. And me leaving the church, I'm sure was devastating for her. I'm sure that it was really hard for her. But she doubled down. And, for probably 6 to 9 months, we didn't speak. We were not on good terms at all. And over the last year, I think that we've made some progress towards communication and towards, being friends, but there's a huge elephant in the room. It's very difficult to talk about personal things. She's very guarded. I'm very guarded. She, in every conversation we have, and I'll say, like, we don't have very many conversations. It's about, maybe we talk on Marco Polo like once a month. And that's actually, yeah, it's probably not that much. It's probably more rare than that. But, and that's only like maybe in the last 6 months that we've started to talk more. Before that, it was like once every 6 months we might have talked. But whenever she's talking on Marco Polo and telling me a story, like I'll give you an example. She, bought a new house. They had tons of issues. It's an old house. It's a major fixer-upper. They had tons of issues with selling their current house. So they ended up just renting it out and then buying the new house, knowing that, that meant that they wouldn't have all the cash out of the old house in order to put into the new house. So it's going to have to be like a much slower process of fixing it up. And so when they moved in, they put all their stuff in the basement, and they just decided we're just gonna kind of live out of the basement while we replace all the flooring and the paint upstairs, right? Well, 2 days after they moved in, their main water line broke. and flooded their basement with all of their stuff, their mattresses, their clothing, their, all of their stuff down there. Did a lot of damage, right? Well, she's telling me this story, and then she says something about, the silver lining in it all and the tender mercy of all of this is that they had homeowners insurance that would cover the extent, the majority of the damage. And she specifically mentioned God, and God was watching out for them and making sure. And I didn't say this to her, but I genuinely, like, my thought was just like, God didn't stop your basement from flooding. He could have done that, right? And God didn't make sure you had homeowners insurance. Your freaking lender did. Like, it's the law. Like, I'm sorry. Like, why are we giving credit to God for shit that he had nothing to do with? It's just, and she it just feels like very purposeful that she inputs this information into like every conversation we have, where she talks about God blessing her and God, making things work out for the best for her. And in this same conversation, she talked about how she literally fell and thought that she broke her collarbone. But when she went to the Instacare, ER, whatever, it wasn't broken. It was just like the AC joint separated or whatever. I don't really know much about that, but it wasn't a break. It was like a tear in her ligament or AC joint, whatever. And so again, she's giving God the credit for this tender mercy, I put in air quotes. It's sad to me. I'm genuinely sad about this because she's trying to, paint a different picture than what reality is. And I just think this is such a common tactic in members of the church. This is what they do to make themselves feel better about situations. And I just wonder, like, does she look at my life and, what's her explanation for, like, the fact that she has all these, bad things happening in her life, and I don't have any of those bad things happening in my life right now, right? Bad things will happen to me. That's the thing, is life is 50-50. We're all going to have bad things and we're all going to have good things. But the problem that I see is that she's constantly giving the credit to God. And when bad things happen to people, Mormons want to blame the person. They never blame God. They say God is testing them or God is teaching them in some way. It's always like this really tricky spin they put on things. But, when John Larson and Kara Burrell and John Dehlin, they all talked about how, their family relationships have significantly changed and how hard it is to have the people you love see you differently and think that you are now under Satan's control, or that that your life is now a tragedy and that you are now, headed for outer darkness. That just hit the nail on the head for me. That is precisely the reason why this is so hard and why relationships moving forward with family, with believing family and friends, is so hard, because for that very, very reason. And, every conversation comes back to something to do with the church. And that's just it's really, really hard for me. And my husband and I were talking after we watched that episode together, and we talked for a long time after it. And there's just this like this hope kind of like, I wonder if this family member will ever figure it out and leave. Like, you hope so, but you also like, I don't want to be just like them where they're hoping and praying for us to come back. Like, It's just really complicated and difficult. And I know, like, I felt that when my son left the church. I really like felt so brokenhearted about it and so sad about it. And then, the praying for him to eventually come back started. And that's just not a way to truly unconditionally love somebody, is hope that they change, right? And actually that brings me to kind of my topic today, because the thing that I really want to talk about today is kind of some of the experiences I've had with parenting, and I know we've kind of dived into this a little bit in the past, and my I've had several people say to me, people aren't talking about the parenting stuff. People aren't talking about how parents harm their kids in the church, and how we're taught these very binary black and white thinking type of ways, and how that affects us. And then also, like, how that changes so drastically when you leave the church. And so I've been like really in my head the last month or two about, all my kids leaving. I've talked about this. They are growing up and they're flying the nest, and it's complicated and it's hard and it's difficult and it's sad, and it's also something to celebrate and to be happy about as well. So it's complicated, but sometimes I get in my head when I'm reflecting on, like the job I've done as a parent, and how like what responsibility I have in terms of like my kids' mental health, and how well they are thriving. And I know that, like, I can't take full responsibility for everything in my kids' life, but I definitely do. I'm aware of my role, right? And how my actions impact my kids. And I've had a really complicated relationship with my oldest child, who is my son, my one and only son. And anyone who knows me well knows this about me, and if you've listened to my podcast, other episodes, I've talked about this quite a bit. I have this really strong, I don't want to call it love hate, because obviously I never hate my son. But you know how, like, some relationships, the pendulum swings really far. Does that make sense? I don't know if people experience this, but you know how, like if a relationship is really hard, really, really difficult, it can also, the pendulum can swing totally so far the other way that it's like an even deeper, stronger bond and love because of the hard things that you've been with. Does that make sense? Like, I don't know if other people feel that, but and I think it goes the same for like people who have a lot of emotions. Those pendulums swing really far, right? And then you've got people like my husband, who his pendulum stays very close to the center. It kind of shifts back and forth, just, very small amounts. But then you've got people like me who have a lot of feelings, who have, bigger, much bigger highs and lows. I think that I'm getting a little bit more balanced in my age. I'm not my pendulum does not swing as far, but my son definitely is more like me. And I think that because I struggled so much with him, I have, a really deep, almost anguished love for him that feels so much more intense than I feel about my other kids. Only because, not that not to say that I love them any less, but that we've been through a lot, right? Like, him and I, we've bonded over the really hard things. That it's like trauma bonding or something. We both caused each other trauma in different ways, and now we're healing from it, and we're growing a better relationship, and it feels really big with lots of feelings. And I can't help but feel a deep sense of regret over the time I wasted trying to change him, regret for trying to force him to be different than he was, regret for thinking that I knew best. Like I knew how to, make him happy. I knew I had all the things, the checklist, right? Regret for thinking that I could control him. Almost like this idea of like breaking him into obedience, like you do a horse, you break them. He was a wild child. And I hurt him. And I made him believe that he wasn't good enough. I made him question his own knowing. I invalidated his feelings for so many years of his life because I thought that that's what I was supposed to do. You guys, like we are put in this position of like being told that it's our job to make sure that our kids learn the gospel and have testimonies and check off all the boxes. And when you have a child that has a completely different idea of the way that life is supposed to go, and they're very opinionated and very strong-willed, the idea is that, well, I just got to come down harder on them. I just got to control them more. I just have to do more to make them stop being that way. And that's where so much of my regret and my sadness comes from. And I feel like, now he has a lot of work to do to undo the harm that I did to him. And that makes me just incredibly sad. And I feel like I want to fix everything for him now. I don't want anything to hurt him. I don't want him to have to face anything hard because of me. I feel this need to make sure he doesn't suffer in any way anymore. And I just really have to work hard at forgiving myself. And I'm probably not the only one who has these thoughts and feelings. I think when you leave Mormonism, you tend to kind of sit back and reflect on all the things you were taught and all the things you believed yourself and all the things you taught to others. And you can't help but have regrets, right? And that actually brings up another thing I've been thinking about is the people I taught on my mission. I can't remember if I've told this story, so I apologize if I have. But essentially, my golden family, and if you've ever served a mission, you know what that means. We met a family who I labeled my golden family because they were perfect. They were looking for meaning in their lives. They loved what we were teaching them. They loved us. They just embraced us with open arms. They did all the things. They were just amazing. And it did not take very long for them to commit to baptism. And then there were some like complicated things where like one of their daughters, so it was a husband and wife and two daughters. And I want to say the daughters were probably like 12 and 14 years old. I don't know exactly because it's been, 25 years. But so the younger daughter had planned to go to her grandparents' house for the whole summer. So she was leaving and her grandparents lived in, 3 states away or something like this. So she was leaving and we did not have the opportunity to baptize her before she left. And so what ended up happening is the wife says, well, why don't you go ahead and, like maybe the older daughter and my husband can get baptized and then I'll wait and I'll get baptized with my younger daughter when she gets back. And we thought, oh, you know what? This is perfect because we can baptize the husband and the older daughter. And then by the time the younger daughter gets home, the dad can get the priesthood and he can baptize his wife and his other daughter, right? And he was stoked about this. He was like, because I think you can get the Aaronic priesthood, I don't know, within 3 months of being baptized or something like this. And so he was super stoked about this. That excited him so much. Now, granted, he couldn't confirm because he wouldn't have the Melchizedek priesthood, but he could baptize, right? So that was the plan, and we moved forward with it, okay? So the husband and the daughter got baptized. Their baptism was beautiful, gorgeous, wonderful, amazing. They were so excited about their baptism, and they told they told the wife's family, like they happened to, talk to her family on the phone, and they said, oh, guess what? We just got baptized into this church. And this family shared, they were like, oh no. So then the in-laws tell him all kinds of things about the church. And he like loses his mind. It is devastating to him. And he calls me one day. He calls me that day and calls me my companion. But him and I were especially close. Like, yeah, we just bonded, right? He calls and he says, I'm sorry, but we have learned all of these things about the church, and we feel like we've been lied to. And I lost it. It was like my heart was ripped out of my chest. I've never been so devastated up until that point in my life. Like I'd never been so devastated in all my life. He said, I'm going to come bring you all the things that you gave us, the scriptures, the church videos, the blah, blah, blah. We are never coming back to the church ever again. And I told him, I said, I promise you, I'm not lying to you. I'm telling you the truth. I did not tell you anything that was not true. And I have not hidden anything from you. Whatever they've told you, whatever you've learned, it's just anti-Mormon lies. And it's because Satan wants to, have you. Satan wants to take you away from the church. I really believed all of these things. And it broke my heart. It really broke my heart. And he no longer trusted us. And he still was very kind to us. He was never mean, but he set a boundary and he stuck to it, right? He said, I've got to do what's best for my family. And the relationship with my in-laws is important to us. And they said that if we join the church, that they will never speak to us again. And so it was really, really difficult. Well, this is one of the things, like I was saying, like when you leave the church, you stop and reflect on everything you did and what you believed and what you taught others, right? And so this family is one of those times when I'm doing that. And I just did this yesterday, so I'm kind of freaking out a little bit about it. But I found the guy on Facebook. You know what's so sad is I can't remember his wife's name, but I remembered his name. And I found him, and he's not married to that wife anymore, which is sad to me. But, that happens. But I found him and I messaged him. And I could see, based on what I could see from his Facebook profile, that he was not a part of the church. So a little bit of me was like super relieved. I'm like, oh, thank God he didn't like go back and eventually end up back in the church. I mean, I didn't think that he would, but there was a chance, right? So I messaged him and I apologized. And I told him like, hey, I've left the church. All those things were true, but I didn't know it. I promise you, I never tried to mislead you or, lie to you. I had been brainwashed since birth. I had been taught all the things that I taught you. And anyways, he hasn't responded yet. So I don't have the end of that story. But when I do, I will share it with you. But it's kind of for me, it's part of the healing process of like, I've got to make amends. I've got to fix the mistakes I made as best I can. I know that I can't take back the things that I've done. I know that I can't reverse time and change how I raised my oldest son and how I mentally and spiritually kind of abused him, manipulated and tried to control and all of these things. And that's a really hard reality to realize that you did those things. But that's, that's the reality of it. And so that's one of the biggest things I struggle with. My life coach has heard me talk about this a million times. She's helped me get really curious about all my feelings around my parenting and how they're so intertwined with the church and what I was taught growing up. And she's really helped me to become like more of an observer of my thoughts and to accept what is when it comes to like the outcomes of my parenting. And in some ways, my son, he has honestly become one of the most emotionally mature 23-year-olds that I have ever known. He's incredibly sensitive and empathetic to others. He's super smart. He's opinionated like no one I've ever met, but he's also open to learning and changing his mind, which I love, because we can have discussions and he's not so set in his ways that he isn't open to learning. He loves to make people laugh. He loves to teach people about the things that he's passionate about. He's super driven. He's so fun to be around. He loves, being kind of in a social setting. So when I look at all the good things that he is, it helps me to not feel like I totally failed him as a parent. But then also it's like, well, he just, he was born with all that good stuff and he is all of those good things despite everything that I did. Hey, so I'm going to jump in here, and I'm recording this separate from the rest of my episode, but I was editing my episode and I found this story. This story popped up in the news today about a Clearfield man being found guilty of assaulting his son during an argument that started when his son said he did not want to go on a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This story was on KSL this morning, and it is so sad. And this is totally relevant to this topic that we're talking about in this episode. And so I wanted to record a little blurb about this story and kind of add it into my episode. But apparently, let's see, it was 2 years ago, the police were called to this residence on a report of a fight between Scott Warner and his 18-year-old son, that he had attempted to remove his son from the home after his son stated that he did not want to go on a mission. The son told police that he and his father were arguing, and after he told him he was not going on a mission, his father grabbed him by the arm, and the two began to physically fight. The victim reported that during this fight, he was knocked to the ground, and Scott, the dad, began to strike the victim's head into the wall repeatedly, as well as squeeze the victim's neck and with both hands, the charges state. The police say that multiple scratches were visible on the son's neck, and he was shaking while speaking to officers and was hesitant to provide details about what had happened. Officers on scene then spoke to the father again, who told them he had tried to forcibly remove his son from the residence as it was his home. I pointed out that the victim appeared to be, I guess this is a quote from the police. I pointed out that the victim appeared to be a lawful resident, and Scott stated that I was not a lawyer. I asked Scott how he had attempted to remove the victim from the home, and he stated he grabbed him. When I asked him where he grabbed the victim, he stated wherever he could. He continually referred to the incident as a tussle. Another family member had also called 911 saying that Warner was choking the victim. The police wrote, I determined Scott to be the predominant physical aggressor. In April, Warner and his attorneys filed a motion to have this case dismissed, arguing that Warner acted in self-defense and that it was the son who attacked him first. Warner was found guilty during this hearing on September 8th. He's scheduled to be sentenced on October 21st. A conviction on a third-degree felony is punishable by up to 5 years in the Utah State Prison. The judge denied a request by prosecutors for Warner to be taken into custody pending his sentencing. I was going to read what the actual, it was, he was convicted of aggravated assault and domestic violence in the presence of a child, third-degree felonies, according to court records. Okay. This story is so incredibly sad on all counts, right? Okay, I feel really bad for this 18-year-old who was assaulted by his dad for not wanting to go on a mission. I'm also not shocked, like at all. This is not surprising. I guarantee that this has happened thousands of times. And not just for not wanting to go on a mission, but, not wanting to go to church. I mean, this dad, yes, he absolutely crossed the line and should not have attacked his son this way. But also, this dad has been brainwashed and indoctrinated to believe that it is his job to make his child do what he's supposed to do at all costs. Like there's this dad was just being a regular Mormon, a Mormon who has been taught that it's his job to lay down the law and to do everything you can. And that he's also been taught to be afraid when his son wants to do something different that's against what he's been taught to do, right? So there's a lot of fear involved in this, and fear turns into anger, or it shows up as anger. And I mean, I totally understand the perspective of the dad. I genuinely do. And I bet a lot of us as parents do. That like when our kids don't do what they're supposed to do, we feel like we're supposed to force them to do that. And we feel angry and we feel afraid that they're going to make bad choices and go down a bad path. And granted, I never assaulted my kid, but believe me, I wanted to. I mean, there were many times where, you know, if I could have drug him to church physically, I might have tried that. And that's embarrassing for me to admit, but I completely understand where this dad came from. I understand the anger. I understand the fear. I understand the forcibly, you know, trying to make somebody do what you want them to do. And then, you know, I just understand how easily it gets out of control. And I think that it is the system. It is absolutely, this incident is a product of the system. It absolutely is. And so much abuse happens in the church because of this system, because of what we've been taught. And it's so crazy to me that, you know, these stories are finally coming out. I mean, I guarantee this has happened so many times. And I bet if I, you know, asked everybody I knew, and if they told the truth, they would say, oh yeah, that happened in my household. Or yeah, I did that. Or yeah, I experienced that. I was a victim of that, right? But it's not talked about, and it's not typically admitted, right? Nobody admits to doing this, but this guy got caught, right? And he's facing the consequences. And I think that it's a reality check for all of us. It's a moment to like think, okay, what is at the bottom of this, right? It's a system that is fucked up, and it is creating some incredibly unhealthy ways of parenting. So, okay, back to the podcast. I was listening to a podcast this past week with a parenting expert, and she talked about one of the most important skills that we can learn as a parent is repair work. And by that, she means like apologies, right? How to repair things. And that hit me so hard because that's exactly where I'm at. One of the things that was super hard for me with like my mom, she made a lot of mistakes, as every parent does, right? My mom didn't always do the most healthy things. She was, you know, and still is in the church. She wasn't very nurturing in the way that I needed it. And one thing that I always wanted from her was just validation that my feelings were valid, acknowledgement of like her mistakes when she hurt me, or an apology. I never expected her to be perfect, right? I don't think anyone expects anyone to be that. But if you have a difficult relationship with a parent, you know that sometimes you don't communicate those hurts that they've caused you because either you've done it in the past and it's turned into your parent being this super fragile, you know, hurt person, and oh, you hate me and I've totally failed and I'm the worst mom and blah, 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 blah. And then you backpedal and you basically take back what you said and you tell them, oh, I didn't really mean that. It's, you know, no, I mean, you're a really good mom. You're fine. Everything's fine. Everything's fine. And you wish you had never said anything. Okay. This has totally happened to me. And if it hasn't happened to you yet, just thank the Lord. It's really hard. It's really invalidating, because what it says is that my parent is too fragile to recognize the harms that they did. And so therefore, like, I can't talk about it. And because I can't talk about it and because they can never validate it, it feels like you can't ever heal from it. And then, a lot of us just never bring it up with our parents because we suspect that they'll never validate our experience, and therefore we never try to communicate it. So, my mission has been to allow my kids to communicate the past hurts, to acknowledge that and validate their feelings. And I can apologize and own up to my mistakes in parenting. I don't have to become a fragile, needy person that requires my kids to make me feel better about myself or my parenting skills. Like that requires my kids to say, "Oh no, my feelings are fine. I'm fine. You did great," and to, just kind of bottle up what hurts they had, right? No matter how much we try to be the perfect parent, we're going to screw up our kids in one way or another. There's literally no such thing as a perfect parent. We are going to make mistakes. We're going to make huge mistakes. And we have to learn how to be sturdy, meaning like not fragile. We don't need our kids to validate us or praise us for everything we did. We need to be emotionally mature enough to own our shit and to work through it, apologize for mistakes that we make, and move forward. And that can be super hard, especially if it's never been modeled for you, right? I think a lot of us experience this, like really poor modeling of parenthood. And if your parent never apologized for anything, then it's hard for you to even know how to do it, right? It's a process. It's a process. So I listened to a podcast with, it was Brene Brown's podcast, and she interviewed Harriet Lerner, who has a book called Why Won't You Apologize? And it's all about how to give and receive apologies, and how, like, the need for apologies, how important apologies are, that, why they matter and what is required for healing past hurts and things like this. It is so, so, so good. And I listened to that podcast twice, because I even made notes and all kinds of stuff. And her book is on my list of books to read. Of course, I have a huge long list, so I haven't gotten to it yet. But this is something that is important to me, because I recognize that one of the things that I felt so brokenhearted about is that my mom couldn't apologize to me. When past hurts were brought up, she became the fragile parent who I then had to console and say, "I'm sorry for having feelings. I'm sorry that you hurt me." Like, I was the one giving the apologies. And my mom was the one crying, saying, "But I thought I did everything I could do for you. And it's so devastating to hear that I was the worst mother ever." And over dramatize it. And it's so, so, so hard. And so back to what I was saying, just like, we need to be emotionally mature enough to own our shit and to work through it, to apologize for mistakes and to move forward. And we also need to be able to know how to accept apologies from someone else. And one of the things I remember her talking about is, when somebody apologizes, do not say, "Oh, it's fine, it's okay." Say, "Thank you." Woo! Isn't that, to me, that is like mind-blowing, right? Because what do we always do when someone says, "Oh, I'm sorry about this"? You say, "Oh, it's fine, it's okay, you're good." Like, we turn around and stroke their ego and try to make them feel better, instead of just saying, "Thank you, that means a lot to me. I really appreciate it." Why can't we say thank you for an apology, right? So I think this is something that that's ironic. We don't learn about apologies in the church. I wonder why that is. That's so interesting. I think the quote from Oakes is, "We do not give or seek apologies." Wow. The word apology is not in the Bible anywhere. It's not in the scriptures. Isn't that fascinating? Interesting. you know what word is kind of synonymous with apology? It's like repentance or forgiveness. Yeah, I think that's really fascinating. It's crazy. So it's never been modeled for us, right? Good apologies have never been modeled. The other component of this is that through this process of like making amends and fixing past hurts and trying to do better moving forward, I'm also learning how to basically reparent myself, right? It's never too late to reparent ourselves and give ourselves the grace and the validation, right, that we did not get from our parents. I've come to a place, and I haven't always been here. And hey, I might go back to the place I was before, but the place I am right now is really genuinely believing that my mom did the best she could with what she knew. And I think that she really thought that what she was doing was what was best for me, and she was trying. I mean, we've come a long, long, long way in parenting and in psychology in the past 30 years, right? Since I was a kid. Hopefully we are wiser, and hopefully we are better than our parents were. But that doesn't mean that we have to think that our parents were horrible people or that they weren't doing the best they could. I genuinely do believe that both of my parents were doing the best that they could with what they knew. My mom spread herself too thin. She tried to do too much, but she also tried to be too controlling. She had a hard time differentiating between herself and her kids, meaning like that everything we did was an extension of her. And therefore, if we screwed up, then it made her look like a bad parent, or it made her look bad, or she took our choices personally, right? Have you guys seen this in your own lives and with your own parents? And I think it's so ingrained in the church. It's so a part of the culture of the gospel to be this, codependent, taking on everyone else's feelings and decisions and life choices and all this kind of stuff. And I totally felt this. I know this well because I also did this. When my son didn't want to participate in the church, I took that to mean that I didn't teach him well enough. I didn't impart of my wisdom or my testimony like I should have done. Because otherwise, if I had done everything I was supposed to do, he would have believed and he would have stayed, right? But actually, him having different beliefs than me was just a sign of a smart kid who knows how to think for himself and not ignore his own knowing. Like, I am genuinely like, thank God my kid did not bend and break to me pushing and pushing and pushing. We are so brainwashed to believe that obedience is the most important thing, even if we don't understand the reasons why, right? And I pushed this on my kids so hardcore, you guys. It's just like, you know what? Stop asking questions. Just do the thing because I said to do the thing. Like, you don't need to know the reasons why, just do it. And sorry, that was never going to work for him. He's like, no, I do need to know the reasons why. Like, it needs to make logical sense in order for me to get on board with this thing, right? But and I wasn't like that so much. I was taught to conform and, to be this cookie cutter person who does all the items on the checklist, who looks pure and clean and modest and follows the straight and narrow path, right? And I just thought, that's how you do it. That's how you do it. You just obey. Obedience, obedience, obedience. That is drilled into our heads from day one. And when my kid didn't want to do that shit, I just made it all about me. So it's just a lot of reflection on my part. It's a lot of healing by just kind of trying to move forward and do better. I could spend the rest of my life just wallowing in my mistakes, but who does that benefit? It doesn't benefit anybody. So while I definitely want to recognize my mistakes and heal the hurts with my son and apologize to him. I think, one of the best ways to make amends is to just not repeat the thing, right? And to say, be able to say, I made a mistake. I screwed up. I'm working on this. I'm not perfect. I didn't know how to do this better. And so now I'm trying and I'm learning. And I mean, my son and I's relationship, I think, is really beautiful right now. God damn. The fact that I think he forgives me. I I think that he's such he's such a beautiful human. I'm so incredibly proud of him. And I think that he's going to do he's going to do better if he's ever a parent. He's going to do better than I did. Because hopefully I've modeled for him, even though I modeled a lot of unhealthy things. Hopefully I've modeled for him repair work and the fact that people can change, that I can change my mind about something, that I can recognize something unhealthy and do it different moving forward. And I really hope and pray that that is the case for him. And I think it is. I genuinely feel super hopeful about his future because of that, because of his freaking resiliency and his ability to forgive me. It's just, it's everything. It means a lot to me. Whew. Sometimes I just have to give myself kind of the green light, the ability to let my feelings out, to go inside of myself and reflect and be curious about what I'm feeling, why I'm feeling, and not brush it off, push it aside, push it away, push it down, and make it go away because it's uncomfortable. It's really uncomfortable to recognize failures. It's really uncomfortable to recognize when you've made mistakes. But one thing that my son said to me the other day was that he said, because he's doing something really, really difficult in the military. And he said, I'm okay if I fail as long as I don't quit. He's so incredibly wise. Failure is not the worst thing, you guys. At least you tried, right? At least, and you keep trying and you don't give up. Failure teaches us, I think, just as much or more, probably more than success, right? And so I'm really just grateful for that. And I mean, I haven't even started all the the processing and healing and apologies to my daughters. I'm still working on my son. I'm going to have a bunch of things to answer for with my daughters too. And we all are. And I guess if we can just, set our expectations that no matter how much we do, there's going to be mistakes. We're going to screw up because we're not perfect. But think about how much of a difference it makes when you can say, I'm sorry. When you can own it. Not I'm sorry, but No buts, no excuses. Just, I'm sorry. And I'm going to keep trying to do better. That is so powerful. So, the power of apologies is the theme of today's topic, I guess. I really, that's not really where I thought I was going with this, but it just, whatever comes up, we talk about. So, but that's really, I mean, in talking about parenting and all of that, I really think that is the thing that sticks out to me the most, is that there is so much power in repair work and in so much healing in apologies. And we've never been modeled this. We've never been taught it, at least from the church. Maybe, listeners, you had parents that modeled this beautifully. I did not. I never did. I never had that. And hopefully we can learn this. So I really recommend that book, even though I haven't read it. I recommend listening to that podcast with Brene Brown, and it's with Harriet. Let me say her name again, Harriet Lerner. And the book, and she has a bunch of books, but this particular one she was talking about on this podcast was Why Won't You Apologize? Healing Big Betrayals and Everyday Hurts. That's the, secondary title of the book. But I think that's the message that I want to get across today is there apologies that you need to make? Are there wrongs that you need to right? Are there things in your past that still give you, pain and sadness? And if there is, what can you do to fix it? You can't erase it. You can't turn back the clock, and you can't just brush it under the rug and pretend it never happened. Those are things that aren't healthy and that aren't healing in any way. So I think an apology is a really great place to start. A sincere apology. And that's the other thing that's really great about her book, is she talks about how to apologize. Like, genuinely, like, teaching you, these are the steps. These are the things you do. These are the things you don't do. So I love that. Love, love, love it. Thank you guys so much for coming back over and over again. I'm sorry that my content has been lacking. I was gone for 10 days, and then it took me probably another 10 days to really recover and like get back to my life and answer all 400 of my emails, and work is busy and just life is busy. My daughter that went up to college last month, now she has COVID. My son is getting ready to leave on his deployment. Oh, we're welcoming a new puppy to our family tomorrow. And there's just all kinds of chaos. It's constantly, we're in a state of chaos, but there's just, and that's why I haven't created content for several weeks. So I apologize for that. I want to try to be as consistent as possible, and I hope that you'll keep coming back. And I always appreciate donations. Oh, you know what? That actually reminds me. I had a message from somebody. Hang on. I had some really beautiful messages. So I don't always see, messages as soon as they come in, or like from donors, And so these are, I don't know, probably a month old or so, but I want to give a shout out to those who have, those who've donated. And there's a message from Chelsea. She says, this podcast has helped me navigate life after Mormonism. Thank you for doing it. Thank you so much, Chelsea. I really appreciate it. And she set up a recurring donation. Oh my gosh, my heart. And then another message from Marcia. Thank you so much. She gave me a beautiful donation. She says, you are my new best friend. I love you, Marcia. You're my new best friend. Everything you say resonates with me. Years ago, after being a lifetime Mormon who did all the things, I found myself divorced. Ex left me with the children, bills, and tons of debt. Went to the bishop for help. He did exactly what you said on your podcast. First, did I have family members to help? Second, he could help me with food and rent for a couple of months. Then he said, We all need to learn to stand on our own 2 feet. Ugh. I vowed to never ask anyone for help again. I have a beautiful, thriving life now, and since I haven't paid a tithe for 25 years, and since you are a fucking amazing grown-ass woman, here's a small donation to help you keep on keeping on. Oh, Marcia, I love you. I just want to give you a giant hug. Oh, my heart. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Literally, from the bottom of my heart. Thank you to everyone who has donated, who has sent me messages of love and support, and who, I mean, it's so validating, right? When somebody says, me too, right? This happened to me. God, it's so healing to just have somebody validate your experience. So thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Marcia, you are my new best friend. And you can come on my podcast and talk to me anytime. I would love it. I seriously would. I am going to try, because I'm so not technologically smart, you guys. I'm sorry. I'm only 46, but I swear in technology years, I'm like 80. Okay. I'm not smart. It frustrates me. It overwhelms me. It makes me feel, I don't know, like I'm an idiot. And so what I'm going to try to do, and my daughter's probably going to have to help me, is I'm going to try to set up an Instagram account for Dissident Daughters. And I'm going to start posting, and I would love for you guys to find me on Instagram and to follow me. And it might take me a minute to start really producing any content, but I want a space other than the podcast, because, you know, stuff comes up, like just shit happening in the world and in the church, that I want to get on social media and just scream it out to the world and say, this is fucking ridiculous. But in my own private circles, you know, on my personal Facebook or Instagram pages, I can't do that, because I end up alienating all my Mormon friends and family. So I need this, you know, I need another outlet to be able to share the things, and to be able to say with no filters, you know, how I actually feel about things happening in the world. So yes, I am setting up a Dissident Daughters Instagram page. And once I get it done, I'll mention it in the next podcast episode as well. But watch for that. I would love for you guys, anybody who's following the podcast, to follow me on Instagram and to talk to me, message me. Like, let's have conversations. I would love it. And I really appreciate all the support and donations and the love from you all. And I give it all right back to you, and send my love back to you guys, because I just feel it huge. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I will be back next week. I've got some episodes coming up with some more guests, so that's going to be really fun. And watch for those, and look forward to coming back and talking more. Love you all. See ya. Bye.